Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode here from GuigLit. Today we are continuing our series on Macbeth and understanding the play itself, continuing with Act 4 Scene 1. So as always, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, share it with all your friends and hit that bell icon for more videos on books, beards and beyond. We are closely creeping up to 200 subscribers. It'd be amazing if you could help me get there. Also, don't forget we're across all social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram and TikTok for more hints, tips and English advice. So as always, what can you do with this lesson and the video itself? Don't forget, you can take notes, you can annotate your copy of the text along with this video, you can use it as a revision tool either by yourself or with fellow classmates, you can use it for mind maps, or alternatively use it to help list examples. Today's a very key scene from the play. It's the witch's final scene where they tell the three prophecies going forward with Macbeth. So, some key information you need to know about this scene before we get started. Now, there are two very small scenes that actually come between this and our previous video that will be on the channel. Click on the channel for more on Macbeth and many other texts. The first of these scenes is where the witches are criticised by Hecate, who is the goddess of witchcraft, kind of their boss for want of a better term. And she criticised them for toying with Macbeth, who in her eyes is just a wayward son, no one of any great consequence or significance, reinforcing Macbeth's true lack of power. Hecate wishes to be involved as well, and we see that there, and that they are going to conspire to further torment the new King of Scotland. Now, also in Act 3 Scene 6, a very small scene with Lennox and a lord, the people of Scotland are beginning to suspect Macbeth for all these strange shenanigans that are taking place and fear him. In Act 3 Scene 6, we get the first scene where Macbeth is referred to as a tyrant. It's a really important point there because we see the mood begin to turn against Macbeth from that very scene onwards. In Act 4 Scene 1, the scene we are covering today, Macbeth goes to the witches to find out more, including these final three prophecies that not only give him future confidence, but it's his false confidence that will eventually become his undoing. So let's begin. We're at a cavern in the middle with a boiling cauldron, thunder once again with the three witches' entrance. We see how the entrance is the very same as Act 1 Scene 1 where they first appeared. We get this idea to boost this atmosphere of fear and drama and tension with them, so that an audience either of the time, a Jacobean audience, or an audience now will get that sense of dread and fear from the witches. Now they begin by using this repetition of thrice the brindled cat hath mewed, thrice and once the hedge pig whined. Notice this again, this continuing imagery of triples. 3, 3, 3s. Everything is 3. 3 witches, 3 murderers on Banquo. They get 3 prophecies. They will give 3 prophecies to Macbeth today, for example. Many choices, many versions. And again, that is a reflection of the Holy Trinity. Okay, it's a corruption of that. Shakespeare's using that image of 3 there, the same way the Bible uses the imagery of 3 for the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Continuing down, we hear Harpier cries, "'Tis time, 'tis time." The third witch is using other mystical beings here to heighten the supernatural element of the scene. And we've got this real building up before Macbeth gets into the scene. We get these quite horrible, disgusting ingredients for this potion and this chant that will ultimately be the point where Macbeth finds out his last prophecies. Poisoned entrails, toads, venom, for example. Imagery of evil and corruption is seen here by the witches and really building this atmosphere before Macbeth appears again. The atmosphere, like it did in Act 1 Scene 2, where he's seen as heroic by the captain and Duncan, the imagery here serves to help build the atmosphere that will ultimately show the fear of Macbeth. Double, double, toil and trouble, fire, burn and cauldron bubble. Probably one of the most famous lines from the entire play. And again, this chant, this witch's chant, which would again increase this fearful element and atmosphere in the mood of the play. You've got to remember, a Jacobean audience, an audience of Shakespeare's time, would have been very much afraid of witches and witchcraft. And in doing so, we have this building up of their real power and fear. The second witch then continues with these kind of evil, disgusting ingredients. The fillet of a fenny snake, eye of newt, toe of frog, wool of bat, tongue of dog, adder's fork, owlet's wing, lizard's leg, blind worm's sting. Again, this real range of more revolting imagery that is then led by another chant. The third witch goes a little further by saying the scale of dragon, tooth of wolf, witch's mummy, raven sea, salt sea shark. The root of hemlock, a poisonous plant there. Liver of blaspheming Jew, the nose of Turk and Tartar's lips, Finger of birth, strangled babe, ditch delivered by a drab. Again, horrible, disgusting imagery that would be revolting both then and now. However, the third witch's imagery plays more upon directly anti-Christian themes. The idea of the Jew, the Turk, for example, the anti-Christian imagery is very much there, whereas previously it was more images of kind of revulsion in a more general sense. So this all builds up to the usual chant, as we've seen already, which again heightens the atmosphere like a song almost. It's almost like a song and chorus effect. And the second witch goes, "Call it with a baboon's blood," only for Hecate to enter there. So further imagery adding to that corruption, and it's kind of the building up and the culmination of this recipe, for want of a better term. Hecate commands and commends them and says, "Everyone shall share in the gains," referencing elves and fairies, enchantments, all very deeply anti-Christian imagery that would bring fear and suspicion at the time. They're all going to benefit from Macbeth's destruction, is what Hecate wants to reinforce there. Then it culminates in a music and song with black spirits, etc. So this building up of this atmosphere, rising to a peak just before Macbeth's entrance, that he is entering their domain of the underworld, of the supernatural, of evil and disgust. Hecate then leaves, and the second witch says a very telling quote here. She says, "By the pricking of my thumbs, something wicked this way comes." Notice there's two particular quotes there I think are really valuable. By the pricking of my thumbs, notice the pronoun my, as if Macbeth is being led on by the witches themselves. And in something wicked, that Macbeth is something, not someone, almost that he's not human, there's an evil sense to him, which is further reinforced here. So it's as if by command Macbeth is coming towards them, but he's not even a man now, he's a something. He's almost more evil than he has ever been. So Macbeth enters at this point, and notice Macbeth's level of confidence. He begins full pelt, full throttle here. "How now, you secret black and midnight hags," straight in with a level of forcefulness and anger, and starts very brave and confident and demanding in this scene. However, the witches are always the ones, you have to remember, they are always the characters that are in control. They use this sophistry again, this sense of a riddle, a deed without a name. They're foreshadowing the prophecies to come and what they're going to tell Macbeth. This cryptic nature foreshadows the cryptic prophecies. However, this does not deter Macbeth. Macbeth goes on to say, "I conjure you." Notice that he's trying to sound demanding, that he's the boss of them, when in all reality he is a mere mortal, as we said, a wayward son before. There's nothing else to him but that. "You untie the winds and let them fight against the churches." Macbeth begins to acknowledge the power these witches have. "Bladed corn be lodged and trees blow down, though castles topple on their warders' heads, palaces and pyramids do slope." Macbeth is saying here that though the witches are powerful and they can control the world, he acknowledges just how powerful and strong they really are. He still is trying to demand on them. So the witches are extremely powerful and extremely dangerous, but he's still the one that's trying to be in control here. He says, "Answer me to what I ask you." He's trying to appear confident and outspoken and being the one in charge, when really their powers go beyond the realms of human understanding. We then see how all three witches finish off each other's sentences, speak, demand, we'll answer, that they're all in unison, that they're almost one powerful entity, these three witches. The first witch says, "Say if thou'dst rather hear it from our mouths or from our masters," giving this illusion of power to Macbeth, this illusion of control. Macbeth continues by saying, "Call 'em, let me see 'em." They lure Macbeth here into thinking that he is the one in control, when in reality, when the prophecies arise, he has very little to no control whatsoever, as you shall soon see. So, the first witch then adds more ingredients: the sow's blood that have eaten her 9 farrow, and the grease that's sweated from the murderer's gibbet, the murderer's, hangman's noose, as it were, to throw into the flame before the spirit comes. And there's a foreshadowing here. This violent ingredients will lead to a prophecy that creates violence itself. Violence begets violence in a way. And we see the first apparition, which is an armoured head, a head in a visor and a helmet. This symbol of war foreshadows the future battles to come, and this idea of what Macbeth is going to be up against, not only in the form of Macduff, but the invading forces of Malcolm and his brother. Now Macbeth tries to be in control and says, "Tell me, thou unknown power." However, he's cut off, and the first witch says, "He knows thy thoughts, hear his speech, but say thou naught." The witches are reinforcing here Macbeth's limitations. They're telling him to just listen and learn. He knows more about you than you think he does. Just hear what he has to say. And so we get the first apparition in the first prophecy. "Beware, Macduff, beware the Thane of Fife, dismiss me enough." This first prophecy is very simple. Beware Macduff. Macduff, the Thane of Fife, is someone who Macbeth should be wary of. And notice the name Macbeth is said 3 times again. Another example of this triple that's seen throughout the entire play itself. And the first apparition disappears. Macbeth is quite emboldened by this. "Whatever thou art, for thy good caution thanks, thou hast harped my fear all right." But so he feels this confidence, but he asks for one more word. The witch, however, says he will not be commanded. Again, Macbeth is not in control. Macbeth needs to listen. Macbeth needs to learn. He will not gain anything from asking any more. So this illusion of power Macbeth really has is very much controlled in a real sense by the witches themselves. Then we see thunder and a second apparition, a bloody child. 3 again, the names of Macbeth being said 3 times. This list of 3 continuing, and the second apparition says, "Be bloody, bold and resolute. None of woman born shall harm Macbeth." So no one born can harm Macbeth. Notice that. None of woman born. So again, in this scene, increases the sense of confidence he has. "Then live Macduff, what need I fear of thee? But yet I'll make assurance double sure." So even though he feels further confidence and more at ease from what this second apparition has said, he will still go on to murder Macduff or attempt to murder those around him, which is really important. Now, the third apparition appears, which is a child crowned with a tree in his hand. This little imagery here is a hint at the kind of prophecy. The trees are the ones that move, as we recall, that we will see in our future lessons. And what we see here is this prophecy being hinted at. The third apparition says, not only does it listen but speak not. So this idea of actually being able to just hear what they have to say. But equally, the third apparition says, "Macbeth shall never vanquished be until great Burnham Wood to high Dunsinane Hill shall come against him." The third prophecy says how Macbeth will never be defeated until Burnham Wood moves to his castle. The forest has to move. Think about that. This idea of it being, it's impossible. It's an impossibility in itself, isn't it? And this is again something that gives Macbeth a sense of strength. He says, "Sweet bodements, good. Rebellion's head rise never till the wood of Burnham rise." So he shall live the lease of nature. He feels even more confident in his third and final prophecy. However, he then continues to say, "My heart throbs to know one thing. Tell me if your art can tell so much. Shall Banquo's issue ever reign in this kingdom?" He needs to know that one thing. Notice that phrase, "my heart throbs." He begs to know more. Despite what it might lead him to, and despite the possible trauma it might induce, he has to know one more thing. And it kind of breaks that 3, doesn't it? 3 prophecies. To know a little more is to know too much more, which is quite interesting in this regard. Now, the witches even confirm this with him and say, "Seek to know no more." The witches are warning him there and saying that it is not for him to know. It is a first here. The witches before are very much willing for him to only know so much, but maybe in a sense they're also toying with him, so this curiosity gets the better of him, as a matter of fact. Macbeth continues and says, "I will be satisfied, deny me this, and an eternal curse fall on you." Again, he still feels that he's the one in control, but he's beginning to overstep his mark now. He is attempting once again to threaten the witches, when we know that the witches have more power than he could possibly imagine having. Then they all begin by saying, "Show, show, show," and they then show a show of 8 kings, that triple used there. And the last one is the ghost of Banquo. Banquo shown in a spiritual sense here. Banquo's death is not his family's end, we have to remember. Fleance escaped, so the Banquo line still lives. But this again shows that Macbeth is limited as a human being. He may have killed Banquo, but he's not killed his legacy, and this is all ultimately for naught, that it will not lead to anything. Now we see the pain and the suffering that Macbeth has in seeing this. "Thy crown does sear mine eyeballs. filthy hags, this hatred and anger. Why do you show me this? Macbeth is in pain at this image. He's learnt too much, and he's realising that in spite of everything he does, Banquo will still ultimately be the true victor, and Banquo in Banquo's line, Banquo's heritage and lineage. So he's this idea of fear and anger at seeing this, for the blood-bolted Banquo smiles upon me and points at them for this. Ultimately, as I've said just now, Banquo is the character that will have the last laugh of the two of them. It's Banquo's lineage that will reign, regardless of what Macbeth does after having heard the witches. So this all turns on its head. 3 apparitions at once were positive, and now they have become something that has been ruined by this revelation. So, the first witch then says, "Why stands Macbeth thus amazedly?" showing that Macbeth is stunned, visibly affected by what he has seen just here. And then they have their ending. They say, "This great king may kindly say our duties did his welcome pay." They vanish, never to be seen again in the play. That is their final appearance. And they leave on their terms. Notice that. They're the ones really in control. They do appeal to Macbeth's ego by saying "this great king" as well, before they ultimately vanish with Hecate. Now, Macbeth is stunned and he says, "Where are they? Gone? Let this pernicious hour stand I accursed in the calendar." He's angry and frustrated and not happy with what he's just heard. He is not fully consoled and calmed by what the witches said, despite his wish to be so. And he needs to know more, but he doesn't know how he ever will. Lennox, a minor lord, enters and and he's asked if he saw the weird little sisters. He says how he doesn't. Again, this kind of reinforces Macbeth's actions and delusions and paranoia. Macbeth is the only person to have seen this, in the same way he's the only person to have seen Banquo's ghost. So it's very telling in that regard. Macbeth is angered by this and says, "Infected be the air whereon they ride, and damned all those that trust them." He's left with only anger. He wanted to be consoled and he wanted calm and comfort, but all he has to his name now is more questions and confusion and despair. Now Lennox informs Macbeth of how Macduff is fled to England. Macduff has gone to bring Malcolm back, and Malcolm's forces bolstered by England and Donalbain. Now Macbeth realises what happens, and time now anticipates my dread exploits. He realises there's little time left, but he also, in the phrase dread exploits, realises that he is doing wrong. It's him that has the problem here over anything else, and him who's creating these problems. So it all arguably makes it even worse. So he continues and says how the castle of Macduff I will surprise, seize upon Fife, give to the edge of the sword his wife, his babes, and all unfortunate souls that trace him in his line. Macbeth is willing to commit mass murder, even of those that aren't soldiers anymore. So while there could have been some arguable kind of moral understanding in murdering Banquo because he was a soldier and he's a man of war, he's now willing to kill women and children as well, showing the brutality of Macbeth and the depths he has been willing to go to as a result. And we see there the ultimate culmination in his level of evil and just how far he has gone and how low he has stooped. Thank you as always once again for tuning in. If I can help at all, please feel free to leave a comment there. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. Like, share and subscribe as always. It means an awful lot. And don't forget, across Twitter, Instagram and TikTok, search GuigLit for more books, more beards and beyond. But for now, take care, all the very best, and bye bye.